Your next 5 Caillou challenge is called Human Readable Time. Write a function which takes a non-negative integer in seconds, you can see that as the parameter over here, as input and returns the time in a human readable format, which is 2-digit hours, 2-digit minutes, 2-digit seconds. So what I just said, padded 2 digits, meaning if your hours were only a single digit, you use a leading 0. Or if you have no hours, you use double zeros. Same for minutes, same for seconds. The maximum time never exceeds this value, 99 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. There are examples in the test fixture, but this is all very clear on what you have to do, I think. So why don't you get to it, pause the video, try this one out, come on back when you're ready. All right, so first thing, I'm going to solve it sort of what I'll call manually, not using any special built-in features, and then we'll take another look using a time span. So first, let's determine how many of each we have, how many hours, how many minutes, and how many seconds. I'll step right down that way, so I'll say int hours, and so if we have a number of seconds, how would we get hours from that? Well, it would be the seconds divided by 3600, right? Because it would be 60 minutes to a minute, and then 60 minutes to an hour. That's where I came up with the 3600. So 60 times 60. That will give us hours. Next, let's get how many minutes we have. To get the minutes, what I'm going to do is take basically the total seconds that we're given, and then I'm going to minus out the number of seconds I already built into hours, and then whatever's left over I'll divide by 60 to get minutes, because there's 60 seconds in 1 minute. So in code, that could look like seconds minus my hours times 3600. Remember, there's 3600 seconds in every hour, and that's why I'm doing this. So however many hours I calculated, I'm just kind of converting it into seconds to get how many seconds were in that. And I'm going to take that away from the total seconds because I don't want to double count those seconds when I'm getting my minutes. I hope that's clear. And then finally, once I do this and I have a bunch of seconds left over, I can divide by 60 to get the minutes. And then you can imagine you could do something similar for the seconds, but it's an even simpler way. But you could go int, well, we already have seconds as the parameter name, so let's do this. Int sec equals, you could do seconds minus hours times 3600, and then you'd also have to subtract out the minutes, the seconds that you already grabbed and formed into minutes. So you could do that minutes times 60, right? Because there's 60 seconds in every minute. So you could do it this way to get your seconds, or you could simply do, we can simplify it. You could say seconds modulo 60, right? Because every grouping of 60 would have already been formed into hours and minutes. So this is kind of whatever's left over there to get the seconds. Either way, whatever way you like better. And then finally, we're going to have to, now that we have each of the values, we got to put it into the proper form. And so we're going to use string format for this. So I'll say return string format. I don't think we've used that much in this series. And if you want to get an idea for this, let me see if string format method converts the value of objects to strings based on the formats provided. And so you have all these options that we will find out about. Let me get down to some examples for you. So the idea here is that you first provide a string, and then you list a comma, and you can put variables, and the variables get injected into these curly braces. And so there's a 0 here because this is the first entry. There's only 1 here, but you can have multiple, and it uses 0-based numbering. Let me see if they have an example with more than 1. Yeah, so here's one. It's got two variables, so date time now would go in slot 0 and 20.4 would go in slot 1. That's sort of the idea. We're going to make 3 of them because we have 3 pieces of information. So for string format, we can do something like in our string, we're going to use 0 for index 0, right? So you can imagine at the end I'm going to do hours, minutes, sec. And so we've got to have entries for all these things. Index 1. You'll see what I'm doing with the colon in a second. And then there's another aspect of this string format that you can use. I wanted to show you where I'm using D for decimal, but there's a bunch of these. There's a C for currency that you'll see if you scroll up the document page. There's one for exponential down here for E, but as usual, you can read as much of this as you like. I'll just stay focused on what we're using in this challenge. So note the D for decimal, and then you can optionally provide a number that says how many digits to use. So in this case, see how it says D8? This was just the D, so it just took the integral value as was, and then with 8, it had to pad 3 zeros onto the 5 characters to make a total of 8 characters. So that's kind of cool. You can imagine what we want then would be D2, right? Saying, hey, it's an integral value with two characters or 2 digits, however you want to look at that. And so we can do something like this. Remember, these first numbers are the indices of the values we put in. So that's 0, 1, 2. So it's going to drop those in place. We've got the colons separating the values just like is shown in the instructions and in the test cases. So if I run this, let's see what we get. String does not exist in the current context. That's fair. Let's go ahead and bring in using system namespace. Green and green. So you could submit here if you want. I'll go over a simpler way to use some built-in features if you want to stick around for that, and I'll probably submit my answer that way too. So the other idea that we have is that you don't have to sort of construct this yourself. If you look at this time span structure, let's go to time span. Represents a time interval, and that's exactly what we're doing here, right? We want a time interval, and then we can use some of its methods to get that in the format that we want. What you should note for our purposes is methods. We've got this from seconds, which will be very useful because we're dealing with seconds, right, with our input. So this returns a time span that represents a specified number of seconds. Perfect. So we can initialize it with that value. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So instead we could say, we'll make a time span. We could say time span, call it time, equals time span, and we'll go from seconds. Let me see if they have an example down here. See how they did it here? We're going to copy this. Seconds in, and we're going to construct it that way. So from seconds. Time span from seconds. And we'll pass in seconds. Good. Let's see, time span. That looks good. The next part, we will sort of format it the way we need, and we'll see how we can use the properties to get those breakouts that we need of hours, minutes, and seconds. So we can say return time Actually, we'll want to use string format again. String format. And we'll do the same kind of setup that we did before, right? 0, D2. I'll just copy the rest of this. It's going to be the same, but it's just where we're deriving our values from. I'm not actually calculating the hours now. It's sort of wrapped up in this time span. It'll take care of that for me. So then I can say, well, let me show you where you may have gone wrong if you had known about time span, and maybe you ran into some trouble here. So back on the time span, you'll notice it has some properties. You might see these, you're scrolling the list right from the top, you go, oh, found it, hours, minutes, seconds, done, right? Not exactly, we'll see what happens. So you could reference the hours times seconds. Oh, I'm sorry, it should have been minutes here, and then seconds at the end. So everything seems well. And you note, uh-oh, what's going on here? Well, we're supposed to be 99. The other tests before all passed, which is great. But I got this 3 here. How the heck did that happen? And you may have noticed, if you subtract 3 from 99, you get to 96. And it makes you feel like that these are hours left over after making days. You know what I mean? Imagine taking the 24-hour units and not counting any of those hours, and then only counting the hours that don't make a complete day. And that seems to be what's going on here. So why is that happening? Well, if we go to hours, returns it in 32, gets the hours component. But notice this, the return values range from negative 23 to 23. It won't go over a 1-day value, and we need something, we need all those hours combined, right, from the days. That's kind of what we're looking for. So if you look through the remaining properties, you see this total hours. And if you look at this, you will get the, well, total hours, right? It's not sort of grouping some of those as into days. So let's go ahead and try changing that part to total hours. Let's see if this comes out any differently. Format specifier was invalid. So one thing to note about total hours was this returned a double. And so what I'm going to do, might be getting in trouble there. Let's just cast it to an int. And then it's happy. And we're clear for submission again. Now we have minutes and seconds, and those ones, they should have been like hours. They return in 32. Notice the property values in 32 for these ones, but the total ones are doubles. So our string format was looking for an integral value here, so I just casted the double one to an integer, and that seems to have fixed the problem there. But yeah, that might have been bugging you if you had just went, you know, time hours. Why isn't that working? Why isn't this working? You know, sometimes you gotta dig a little deeper and read more of the documentation. So I'll probably submit mine like this. That works for me. Nice and short, clear. We'll hit the attempt again. And I passed. So I'll submit. Can check out what other people did. Keep adding to that toolbox. So yeah, they just didn't even bother breaking out some of those values. They just kind of dropped them in place in the format call. Very nice and compact. That was more like what we did. See, they had to use total hours too and cast it to an integral value. String format. So yeah, kind of A lot of stuff the same here. So feel free to look through that as you like. Otherwise, let me know what you came up with. Bring on the questions, comments, concerns. Otherwise, I'll see you in another challenge. Thank you for watching.